There's something you need to understand, something most people never pause long enough to even consider. The person who hurt you, betrayed your trust, manipulated your kindness, and made you question your own worth. They are not as untouched as they pretend to be. Behind the cold silence, the lack of remorse, the gaslighting, and the indifference, there is something else happening. Not always visible, not always conscious, but absolutely real. Because energy doesn't lie. The mind may suppress, the ego may defend, but the body keeps score. The nervous system remembers, and eventually, the same tactics used to hurt others begin to hurt the person who used them. Let's go deeper. What you have to understand is that when someone hurts you, especially someone with narcissistic tendencies, it's not really about you. It's a reflection of their own inner fragmentation, their own inner chaos, projected outward onto you. The reason they disconnect so easily from others is because long before they abandon you, they abandon themselves. They severed the emotional ties to their own vulnerability, their own inner child, their own truth. And when someone is disconnected from themselves, they can only relate to others through the lens of control, manipulation, or survival. What you experience may have felt personal, devastating even. And while the pain is real, the intention behind their behavior was never rooted in emotional depth. It was rooted in emotional avoidance. Because to connect with your pain, they would have to connect with asterisks, their own asterisks. And for someone who's spent their life building psychological armor, vulnerability feels like death. To acknowledge how deeply they've hurt someone would mean confronting the parts of themselves they've locked away in darkness for years, maybe even decades. So instead they turn off empathy, not because they truly feel nothing, but because feeling everything would be too overwhelming. The guilt, the shame, the memories, it's all stored deep within the subconscious mind. That's where they live most of the time, in the subconscious, reacting instead of reflecting, performing instead of connecting, trying to win the game of control so they never have to feel out of control again. But energy doesn't disappear. It just shifts, it suppresses. It stores itself in the nervous system. And over time, those unacknowledged wounds begin to show up, not always as tears, not as apologies, but as tension, as disease, as restlessness that won't go away no matter how many people they manipulate or how many masks they wear. Because the truth is, no one escapes their energy. No one escapes the signal they send out into the field. The person who hurt you may look confident. They may even seem to move on with ease. But inside there's a fracture that grows every time they bypass the truth. Every time they abandon responsibility. Every time they choose ego over evolution. And that's the part they can't outrun. That's what they feel in private. Not necessarily guilt in the way you might expect, but an invisible weight, a disconnection that can't be filled by attention or praise, an inner numbness that no success can soothe. Because you cannot feel joy when your heart is closed. You cannot create connection when you're afraid of your own reflection. This is not about excusing their behavior. This is about seeing clearly. When you stop personalizing their patterns, you free yourself. You stop internalizing their pain as your fault. And you start understanding that the way they treated you says far more about their inner world than it ever did about your worth. That clarity, that shift in perception is the beginning of emotional liberation. We are emotional beings first. Long before we speak, before we act, before we even think, we feel. And when that feeling becomes too intense, too painful, too unfamiliar, the subconscious mind learns to protect us. For some, that protection looks like avoidance, suppression, pretending. And the more often we run from emotional discomfort, the more skilled we become at convincing ourselves and others that it doesn't exist. But the body always knows. You can't escape what's unresolved. You can't outrun energy. It stays. It waits. It whispers when the world gets quiet. When someone hurts you, particularly someone deeply self-absorbed or emotionally disconnected, they might appear unaffected. They might act as if nothing happened, like your pain doesn't even register. They distract themselves with noise, with new people, with achievements, with shallow conversations. But the deeper reality is this: emotional pain doesn't vanish just because it's ignored. It goes underground. It stores itself in the nervous system, in the muscles, in the tension held behind the eyes, in the weight pressed into the chest at night. The conscious mind may say, I didn't do anything wrong, or they deserved it, or even I've moved on. But the subconscious is still processing. The subconscious is still reacting to the trauma they created, but refused to acknowledge, because when you suppress guilt, it doesn't dissolve, it manifests. It might show up as irritability, as chronic stress, as sleepless nights, or sudden bursts of anger that feel out of proportion. That's not random. That's stored emotion demanding release. You can lie to your mind, but you can't lie to your biology. Every suppressed feeling is a vibration unintegrated. And over time, that backlog of unresolved emotion becomes a frequency that defines your state of being. What you don't transform, you transmit. That's why some people are always on edge, always defensive, always cycling through conflict. They're not free, they're trapped in a loop, repeating old patterns, recreating old pain, rehearsing old wounds. This is what happens behind closed doors, after the silence, after the blame, after they've convinced everyone around them that they were the victim. In those quiet moments when no one is watching, when the distractions fade, the mind starts replaying scenes, the body starts tightening, the chest contracts, the jaw clenches, and even if they don't name it, even if they don't say it, their system remembers, their chemistry shifts, their heart rhythm changes, their brain waves lose coherence. That's the hidden cost of unacknowledged harm. They pay for it not through karma imposed from outside, but through incoherence created within. Because every time they hurt another and refuse to see it, they further separate from themselves. They widen the gap between who they are and who they pretend to be. And no external validation can fill that void. No apology they avoid can quiet that inner unrest. The longer they hide from truth, the heavier it becomes. Not always visible, but always vibrating underneath the surface. The nervous system doesn't need your permission to tell the truth. It doesn't wait for your ego to catch up, or for your mind to make sense of it all. It simply reacts to your energy, instantly, instinctively, without filter. And that's why even when someone pretends to be fine on the outside, their internal world often tells a completely different story. You can see it in the way their eyes dart when they're confronted, in the sudden stiffness in their posture, in the shallow breath they take when something they thought was buried gets triggered. These aren't signs of strength. These are signals, evidence that the body is speaking what the mouth refuses to say. When someone operates from ego, from pride, from a sense of needing to dominate or be right, they often become emotionally disconnected, not because they don't feel, but because they've spent years teaching themselves not to. But the body remembers what the mind represses. The body stores every argument, every moment of cruelty, every lie told to avoid accountability. And that accumulation of unprocessed emotion builds pressure, internally, energetically, physiologically. It's easy to wear a mask in public. It's easy to craft a persona, to perform confidence, to carry an identity that looks powerful and unbothered. But behind closed doors, when there's no one left to impress, and no more distractions to run to, the body begins to speak. Insomnia, chronic fatigue, tightness in the chest, unexplained tension, racing thoughts, all of these are signs that the nervous system is dysregulated. It is trying to find balance in an environment that was never emotionally safe to begin with. Even those who harm others, even those who manipulate or emotionally abuse, are not immune to this, because the nervous system doesn't recognize ego stories, it only recognizes coherence or incoherence. And when someone consistently acts out of alignment with compassion, truth, and presence, they fall out of coherence with themselves. That disharmony becomes their baseline, it becomes their energy signature. And over time, that signature affects every area of their life, from their relationships to their health, to their ability to feel joy or experience peace. What they don't understand is that the emotional pain they caused others is now being reflected back to them through their own biology. The guilt they never acknowledged becomes restlessness. The truth they refuse to face becomes tension. The lies they told themselves become the static that clouds their clarity. They are no longer living in the present moment, they are surviving in a constant loop of unresolved emotion. No matter how much they try to control the outside world, they can't escape the internal one. And the body always brings the truth back to the surface, because healing doesn't happen through avoidance. It happens when coherence is restored, when the mind and the heart begin to operate in harmony again. Until then, their nervous system will keep sending signals louder and louder, until they are finally ready to feel what they've spent a lifetime trying not to. Healing doesn't begin the moment someone says sorry. Healing begins the moment you decide to stop giving your power away to someone who never knew what to do with it in the first place. You don't need their guilt to feel whole. You don't need their recognition to validate your experience. What you need is to bring your energy back into alignment with yourself, to stop rehearsing their story in your mind and begin writing your own. The longer you wait for their apology, the more you pause your evolution for someone who may never catch up to the truth. You see, healing is an act of creation. It is a conscious decision to become greater than the pain, greater than the memory, greater than the energetic tether that binds you to the past. Because every time you replay what they did, every time you overanalyze the why, every time you wait for justice or remorse, you reactivate the same neural networks in your brain and the same chemicals in your body. You keep reliving the moment. And your biology doesn't know the difference between a past experience and a present thought about the past. The body responds the same. That's why you still feel the weight. That's why the pain feels fresh even after time has passed. But the moment you recognize that you are not that memory, that you are not that emotional signature, that you are not what they made you feel, you step into liberation. You stop asking, why did they hurt me? And start asking, why am I still giving them access to my emotional field? That shift in awareness is the beginning of transformation. Because the more you bring your energy back to yourself, the more whole you become, the more coherent you become, the more powerful you become. And when your energy becomes elevated, when you tune into gratitude, clarity, peace, and presence, you move into a state of being where their actions no longer define you. You stop living in reaction, and you begin living in creation. That's the secret. The ones who hurt you may never see what they did, but you are not required to carry their blindness any longer. You don't need closure from them when you can create closure within yourself. And you don't need their emotional capacity to return to love, because your healing was never dependent on their evolution. You are not here to remain stuck in someone else's story. You are here to become the observer, the alchemist, the creator. And that means taking all the energy you once gave to understanding them, explaining yourself, or hoping for change, and reinvesting it into your own coherence, your own freedom. The past can only live on if you keep feeding it. The moment you stop rehearsing it, the moment you stop identifying with it, the moment you raise your energy above it, you collapse that timeline. You begin to heal not because they changed, but because you chose to. And so the invitation is simple but profound. You can stay trapped in a cycle of overthinking, replaying, and waiting for someone else to feel what they refuse to face. Or you can set yourself free. True freedom isn't when they admit they were wrong, it's when you no longer need them to. Because your peace, your power, your healing, it was never in their hands. It's in your choice to rise above, to tune into a greater intelligence, and to create a life no longer shaped by pain, but by purpose. You are not here to suffer. You are here to transcend. So reclaim your energy, step into coherence, and become the creator of your own reality. Now, if this message resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments, give this video a like, and send it to someone who needs to hear this today. And tell me, what part of your power are you ready to take back starting right now?